Hello and welcome. Initial episode of Reinforcer Radio. My name is Jeff Lawhorne, and I'm really excited to bring this show to you. I'm really jacked on getting this out and sharing some things with the wrestling world, the professional wrestling world. And I can't do it without my co-host here. He has been doing this for over 30 years at this point. Andrew Anderson, the Reinforcer himself. That's where we get the name of the show. Andrew, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
I am good. Are you jacked? Are you excited?
I'm excited about this. I mean, people have been telling me, do your podcast, do a podcast. Now, I did a podcast about four years ago with the late Kevin Sullivan called The Dungeon, In the Dungeon with Kevin Sullivan and Andrew Anderson, which was pretty cool. We did that, but there were a lot of glitches. Kevin was starting to get ill, and he couldn't really do things that long, or that he didn't have the proper equipment at home. You know, I mean, he was so like neurotic. He was in his late 70s, mid 70s actually, and he was having a tough time with it. But other than that, some of the best interviews were done with Kevin on those shows. So, and I'd like to try to bring something back in his kind of spirit, you know.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Andrew had a very close relationship with the late, great Kevin Sullivan. We're definitely going to dive into some Kevin Sullivan memories, some time on the road that these guys spent together over the years, and hopefully down the line, do an entire tribute show to the greatness of Kevin Sullivan, because, man, his career, was packed, WCW years into the indie scene, and the time he spent with you as well. So we will definitely get to that, and definitely, do some stories. I'm sure you got a lot to talk.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Kevin also told me a lot of stories. I think most of them were he put them out already on different podcasts that he did. He would always shoot interviews and stuff like that, which was pretty cool, So, but there's some stories that he told me that were a little stronger than the local podcast that he was doing, So.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, the nice thing is we'll be able to talk about some of that stuff, and we don't have to really censor ourselves too much,
No, not too much.
But all right, so let's get things started here. The main purpose of this show, in the intro show here, we're gonna talk a little bit about ourselves. It'll probably be one of the few times we really talk about ourselves. For those of you who are not familiar with Andrew's career and what he's brought to the professional wrestling world, and then we'll talk about me a little bit as a fan. That's mainly what I bring to the table is a fan.
You bring the mark quality to the business.
Absolutely, you can call me a mark all you like.
We're all marks. We're all marks. Listen, I was a mark before this wrestling roller coaster that I've been on for the past 30-something years. I mean, so everything in the wrestling business, for the most part, starts from markdom, as I call it, fandom.
Absolutely. And, that's the beauty of professional wrestling. I mean, if you're not a fan of it, it's really difficult to, in my opinion, it would be difficult to bring it to life when you're in the ring and when you're behind a microphone, or, you're portraying a character that you need people to believe, and if you're not believing it, how are you doing it?
Yeah, you got to well, first of all, it's all about character development. You have to develop your character, because it just doesn't happen overnight. Some people it does, some people it doesn't. And I got to tell you, for me, it didn't happen overnight. I had to step into the Andrew Anderson persona and leave everything else behind for a while, you know what I'm saying, and just become the Reinforcer, or later on become the Purple Haze, so which kind of, can, fuck with your normal life, you know what I'm saying? And because you draw that line in the sand, and sometimes you don't know when to cross it,
Yeah, actually, that brings me to really my first question. I've heard over the years, how guys like Ric Flair have lived that life. He is Ric Flair, and he's Ric Flair 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that you've been able to really live the Andrew Anderson character 24/7 for as long as you've been doing it?
Yeah, I for a while there, I was getting like it was becoming, overbearing, overpowering, and I mean, everything with the character came the excess, and with the excess comes disasters sometimes, and other times it was beneficial. But for the most part, when you start becoming, you believe your own hype. You know what I'm saying? You believe your own insanity, and it wound up being a little crazy for a while there.
I got you, man. I mean, it's got to be, you know what I mean? Because you're living that life on the road, and you're living that life.
Yep.
You guys are bigger than life, and those old sayings, about how big you guys become, and it's got to play on the mental psyche of reality, you know what I mean, versus what you guys do in the ring.
Yep. I mean, it got to a point at one point that, I would have a few drinks, a few something, and all of a sudden the reinforcer comes out. It was like Jekyll and Hyde, sort of. So, but now, obviously I have Karen in my life and everything, and I've grounded myself a lot, and I've changed. A lot of things have happened. Some good, a lot of it mostly good, but some of it was, you get hit with a learning curve.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm sure we'll definitely talk about the lovely Miss Karen at different points of the show, and what she brings to your career, and I mean, and your personal life for that matter. I mean, you guys are a team in the ring and outside the ring.
Yep. Now she's become an integral part of my wrestling career. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. It is the twilight of my career, as far as active wrestling. I'm going on a limb and saying this 2025 is my last year of active in-ring competition. I mean, I can't say it'll be my last match ever in 2025. I'll probably have one-offs, tag team matches, or something else whenever the feeling's right. But I think it's time to move on. I mean, when I can't go out there and give 110%, it means that something's got to give. I've seen a lot of guys, like, in their elder years, still getting a ring, and I said to myself, that will never be me. And all of a sudden now I find myself being, that guy. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I don't want to like overstay my welcome.
Well, and you see how some of these guys, unfortunately, it affects them, and then, they're just not going like they used to, and it's not really the legacy I'm sure that you want to leave for your career. You want to go out when people will remember, the badass guy that you are.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people have gone out, at an elderly age, and some have, like, one of the guys I really admire is Tito Santana, because Tito Santana retired at 40. He retired at 40 from active, like, TV style wrestling. He'll still wrestle, do indie appearances and stuff like that up until about a year or two ago. So, which was pretty cool, because he was still out there and still in the ring doing things and capable of doing things. But he just said, you know what? I'm going to wind it down. And he wound it down, and he did a great job of it, so, which is pretty cool.
And I'm sure that's got to be tough. You know what I mean? This is your life.
Oh, it's hard, man. I think of waking up and not having wrestling, not having a show that weekend, or a show during the week in the summertime, and just waking up to it. It's a whole brave new world out there. You know what I'm saying? Or sometimes it could be terrifying, because I mean, when that's your job, that was not only my job, it was my lifestyle for a while. I mean, it's hard to adjust. And I always think, people will say, oh, well, he never had a contract, he never did TV time, and he did this and did that, or didn't do this and didn't do that. It's always about what you didn't do, but it didn't matter that for 32 years that I wrestled straight through those 32 years. I had 4 months off when I tore my ACL, and then in 2008, during and I did film the movie The Wrestler with a torn ACL, and then 4 months off during COVID. Maybe 4.5. So in over 30 years, I only had 8 months of rest time, of downtime. So I mean, that was and that was kind of made you feel antsy. Just those 4 months were crazy.
Well, hopefully, we can scratch a little bit of that itch by talking professional wrestling.
Oh, absolutely.
And we can build something here that's a community for people to be able to share, their time, their love for this business, their love for this sport. That's the main thing that I love about it. Just being able to sit down and talk to people who are involved in it, we're a different breed, all of us in general. The marks, the professional wrestlers, everybody. We're definitely a different breed. We don't want to grow up.
Wrestling fans are the greatest fans in the world. I compare wrestling fans to Kiss fans because everybody knows everything about Kiss. Fans know everything going back to the legacy of Gene, Peter, Paul, and Ace, and up to the newer guys that are in the band and everything. But with wrestling fans, it's all about history. Now, I am noticing a trend that a lot of the younger guys do not really follow the older vintage stuff. They don't follow the legacy. That's one of the things that I want to address later on other podcasts. It's about respect issues and how certain types and styles of wrestling have become archaic. You know what I'm saying? I mean, look, I see these. I was never in my career an indie darling. Nobody ever really went out of their way to say, oh, he's the king of the indies or this and that like that. As long as I've been on wrestling, I've always been, hey, it's Andrew Anderson. He's old school. I don't think I've ever done a suicide dive in my life. So and
no, but I've seen you jump off of a cage
multiple times.
So I mean, maybe not the suicide dive.
That's why I'm retiring because when you got your backs every time you hit that mat from that cage, it took its toll on me.
And we will definitely put that up on our YouTube page and our Facebook page. The time that at least one of the times that he jumped off the top of the cage. I mean,
now everybody does it. I remember seeing Jimmy do it, Jimmy Snuka do it, in that match where him and Don Morocco, but before that against him and Bob Backlund. And I thought that was like the first time anybody ever dove off a cage. I had no idea that Jimmy was diving off the cage onto Jesse Ventura and Playboy Buddy Rose and guys like the Grappler and everyone else in Portland. So he was doing all that in Portland, Oregon. So I had no idea about any of that. But then when I found all this out when Jimmy broke me into business, Jimmy would tell me all the stuff that was going on, So, which was pretty cool. So I learned a lot of the backstory of the cage dives and stuff like that. So he wasn't the first one.
So that brings us kind of full circle right there. You said Jimmy Snuka was one of the two guys that really got you into the business. Tell the story of when you first met Jimmy Snuka and the Metal Maniac, and how those guys approached you and kind of how it all began for Andrew Anderson to say, you know what, I kind of want to try this whole professional wrestling thing.
Well, what happened was initially how I got into wrestling was from Metal Maniac and Jimmy Snuka, and but the first wrestler that I've ever met was Mike Masters, aka Rocky Jones, who became a very, very good personal and close friend of mine, who passed away in I think 2022 of cancer, and that was a really tough spot for me too, losing him, and I met him at a bar in North Arlington, New Jersey, called Fatso Fogarty's. They were famous for having turtle races and stuff there. It was a college bar. And I went there in 1989. I just graduated college, St. Peter's University, and I got there and I meet this guy who's pouring us shots, and we're talking, and then he said, somehow we got on the topic of wrestling, and he said, oh yeah, I used to room with Jake Roberts in the Road Warriors. I was like, get out of here. This guy's full of shit, And all of a sudden, turns out he really was, and he's telling me all these stories, and it was pretty cool, and he was bartending, and then years later I don't see him. I don't know what happened. Then in 1990, 91 and 92, I'm in a bar in not that far away from the initial place. I was might have been Wallington, New Jersey. It was a place called Rock the House, and I was working there as a bouncer, and when I was on throwing an inebriated patron out, and as I was throwing it out, in comes, I see this big mullet, and it's the Metal Maniac, and I recognized him because I went to John Arizzi, John Arizzi's fan fest that he had in Queens, New York, to two of them. I went to two of them in LaGuardia Airport that he had there in the LaGuardia Airport hotels. And I recognized the Metal Maniac. And from that, I never heard of him before in my life, but once you meet him once, you'll know him for the rest of your life. He was one of those guys that was, a unique character. So I met Jeff briefly there, and then all of a sudden he came walking, and right behind him was Jimmy Snooker. You couldn't miss him. Jimmy Snooker comes walking. He had the headband on, and he had his jacket on. He had a leather jacket on. He came walking. It was pretty cold. That I think it was like in March or April, and he came in, and I was like, wow! I literally dropped the guy that I was throwing out, and I went over and started talking to Jeff. I was afraid to talk to Jimmy, so I went and started talking to Jeff, and then later on we're talking. We're doing shots of Malibu and shots of Jack Daniels, and Jimmy and Maniac wasn't drinking. He wasn't a drinker, but Jimmy was, and Jimmy says, I want to talk to you, and he comes up with a bunch of different things. He says, have you ever thought to wrestle? And it was a no brainer from there,
Absolutely. What year was that?
90, 92.
All right. So about 1992. And then how did you get hooked up with ECPW? Because they're the guys that you initially hooked up with to get your training.
Jeff Miller, the Metal Maniac, was there, and he brought me up there with Jimmy and introduced me to Gino Caruso. And that was another thing too. This is where it came full circle, because Rocky Jones originally owned ECPW. He sold that school to Gino. And one day I'm in there and I'm like, hey, that guy really wasn't bullshitting me. And that's how I realized Rocky was legit, and it was almost like it was meant to be, I mean, I know the wrestling community is a tight community. At the time, it was even tighter because this was pre-social media. This was all you had was Dave Meltzer's sheets that you had at the time, so you had the sheets and stuff like that out there, but you had nothing else. So it was pretty much like you were asked to be a wrestler. You just didn't go to a wrestling school at the time. You were asked. And I think I was on the cusp of that, where you were invited to be in the business. But then I met so many people with so many similar stories, I mean, that were phenomenal workers and athletes. And, so it was pretty cool. So I made a lot of really good friends from that era, from the early 90s to mid 90s, that are still friends today.
Oh, I'm sure, and I'm sure a lot of these guys that you ran around with, I'm sure the stories that y'all had, throughout the years,
and a lot of them are not here, unfortunately, because the wrestling lifestyle, cost them the ultimate price, their life, which everybody fell into that category at one. Well, not everybody, but a lot of the guys would get mixed up with different substance abuse or alcohol, and I guess alcohol is a substance, so that's substance abuse. So, people had their own demons, and a lot of them believed their own hype, and whether they were indie guys or former WWE guys, former WCW, former NWA, guys from, it was a crazy business.
Crazy business. I can't even imagine. I really can't imagine. And I'm sure, throughout the years, it changed a lot. 90s, 2000.
Oh yeah.
It changed completely. Speaking of changes, right? So what character name did you initially go with after?
I was the Siberian Tiger. I stayed in a room with Gino Caruso and Metal Maniac, and later on, Jimmy. Jimmy wasn't there for the crowning of the Siberian Tiger name, but they were like, can you speak Russian? I was like, I speak a little bit of Russian. Well, that's all you need is a little bit. Shoot out some words in Russian, because, my father was Polish, and he was, he taught me, and my mom, and my aunts really taught me how to speak a little bit of Polish and Ukrainian and Russian, and I learned all that, from my dad's side of the family. And it was like, so I came out there and I'd be cursing people out in Russian. They had no idea what the hell. They were like, well, you know how to speak Russian? I said, well, I know all the bad words. Use them. And I did, and it worked. And next thing I know, the Siberian Tiger meets Nikolai Volkov. And Nikolai Volkov just got done from a run with Boris Zukov as the Bolsheviks. And another one, that was another thing that Gino Caruso did. He hooked me up with John Krasinski and Nikolai Volkov, which is General Nikita Brezhnikov and Nikolai, and that was a tremendous time, working with Nikolai as a tag team partner, and then later on as an opponent, was always fun. I mean, I didn't like working with Nikolai as an opponent because, man, you would be bruised, battered, and beaten afterwards. And I just remember Iron Sheik looking at me and going like this, goes, "Oh, Baba, I say prayer for you." He goes, "I say prayer for you. We work with Nikolai. Nikolai's cement mixer." So, and I would get, Nikolai had no, I guess he didn't know how to pull his punches, and he was a boxer in Croatia, and and he was able to really hit. He was a power lifter and a boxer, and I always say Nikolai, not move wise, move set wise, or necessarily look wise, but Ike always said he was the original Brock Lesnar because he was just the real deal. He was just big, thick, strong, and just, was like, woof, intimidating. So if you didn't know Nikolai, he was a big son of a bitch.
So I know that another guy that was influential and helped you train was Kodiak Bear. Did the Siberian Tiger gimmick, did that ever come off of anything with the Kodiak Bear?
No. Kodiak, Tom Casola, the Kodiak Bear, was always there at my trainings and stuff like that. And he always helped a lot with psychology more than moves. Gino helped a lot with the basic wrestling and helping us get our movesets down. Tom would help with, fine tuning everything. And then you also had two other guys there that were Terry Manton, the executioner, and executioner number 2 was Jerry Fazio. And so they were the executioners, and Terry passed away in 98 or 99 of a brain embolism or something like that in a car. He was one of the original guys that took on the executioner gimmick after Kowalski and Studd did it. So he worked a lot with the early WWF guys, what is still WWF. So with like Putski and Mike Sharp and everybody like that. So and Fuji. So he worked a lot with all those guys. So, and he was one of the guys who helped train me. He was a power lifter and he was a very strong individual. And Jerry Fazio was a school teacher in New Jersey and a school district in Lafayette. He was also from North Arlington. He was really good friends with Rocky Jones. So it was like everything came full circle, and Jerry helped me a lot. And Jerry and Rocky helped me a lot. They took me aside and we did shows and they ran shows, and it was a good time working with them. So I was always close to home at the time, those years, and working in areas with those guys, which was tremendous to learn the business. So I learned from old school talent, I learned from old school talent. And then of course you had guys who were there like who broke in the same time as I did, like Crowbar, Chris Ward, and Ace Darling and guys like that. They were like a cut above. They were just totally different athletes. You know what I'm saying? They were able to do all the flippy stuff. I mean, it was amazing. So, and Mike Moraldo, Ace Darling taught me a lot of psychology. So, working with him was a lot of fun.
I'm sure we'll dive into a lot of wrestling psychology, going forward in the show, and the things that go into developing a character and making sure that people are staying interested in the match and and building a storyline while you're in the ring.
Yeah, there's not a lot of story. I mean, the storylines are there, but I mean, a lot of the old school stuff I think has lost. I think Triple H is bringing all that back. I mean, he's great, and congratulations to him on being the first inductee for the 2025 Hall of Fame. He's done so much for the business. I mean, for the boys especially, because he's never lost that feeling of one of the boys. He was always one of the boys, I guess. So that's really good to see.
And I absolutely love the fact that that Taker and Shawn were the ones that were able to come out and surprise him on stage.
That was amazing.
And do that. Shawn Michaels was one of the reasons that I really, really got into professional wrestling in probably around the mid '90s.
Oh, he's one of the greatest of all time. There's no way you can say not. I mean, he's right up there with Ric Flair, with Hulk Hogan, The Undertaker. I mean, Terry Funk, Dusty Rhodes. I mean, he just took the ball and ran with it. Went from the Rockers to that. That was tremendous. But that's a whole other topic. You could talk about Shawn Michaels all night.
Absolutely. I could go through match after match of Shawn Michaels' career. He was somebody that, I remember, as a teenager, just wanting to become a professional wrestler because of Shawn Michaels.
You had the Rockers poster in your room, and you masturbated frequently to it, didn't you?
Oh, Marty Jannetty always just did it for me. He was one of those kind of guys.
Marty's great. Marty's gone through some shit too. I mean, he's some people say he got the shit end of the stick, and I kind of did. I mean, but I always think Marty was underrated too. He was just great. He was his own worst enemy, but he's also a really good friend of mine, and I'm so proud of the way he's changed his life around. Got his foot fixed and everything.
And it's funny because they initially talked about when the Rockers were coming up there how Marty Jannetty was the guy, and they really thought that Marty was going to take off on his own, and then Shawn he leapfrogged that completely.
Totally.
But that's a whole nother show. We'll definitely talk more about tag teams, the Rockers, some of these other great guys,
the Nasty Boys and the Road Warriors.
Yeah, some of your boys there and the Road Warriors, and but let's get back to you. And so where did you go from like the ECPW days, and then as you start building a career in professional wrestling, where do you go from there? Where did the life take you?
Well, I got I booked wherever I took whatever bookings I could take. I worked for the Savoldis one day for Jersey Championship Wrestling, which later on became GCW. I was their first heavyweight champion. A New Jersey, was it Jersey All Pro Wrestling, New England Championship Wrestling. Then going down to Florida, there was a little version of Florida Championship Wrestling at the time, but it wasn't Florida Championship Wrestling, so I'd go down to them, work for some small promotions in Texas. It was like you just went wherever, and if you got a call to do a dark match or something like that, you were one of the lucky ones. I mean, not everybody got calls for that. Guys would be sitting there and waiting for a spot and everything. So it was wrestling. I mean, it was just you do whatever you have to do to make it at the time because you're hungry, you're young, and you want to do it. I see these kids now; they have it on a silver platter. If you ask me, they didn't have to do what we did. They have the internet. We had to mail out tapes. We had to mail out VHS tapes to promoters so they could see what we're doing, who we are, and you had magazines like Pro Wrestling Illustrated and The Wrestler and Inside Wrestling and stuff like that, and if you were lucky to get a little spotlight in there, you were lucky, or if you got a blurb of a match that you had in the back where it had matches all over from the NWA to WWF, All Japan, everything. I remember they used to highlight all the big leagues for us. And on the bottom, that have all these results from matches. And if you got your name in that, it was a big deal. It was a big deal back then. Now, I mean, everything is all over the place now. Now you're in a database. You're in the matrix. So
yeah, and I'm sure the content that's out there. It's so easy to access. It's so I remember growing up and having to go down to like Blockbuster or West Coast Video and pick up the old VHSs. Kids, if you don't know what VHS is, you'll have to go on the old Google there and type the VHS in. And,
you know how many of those I threw out and now they're worth money?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I remember I had the last Battle of Atlanta. I think it was between Tommy Rich and Buzz Sawyer on this VHS tape that in the late 80s, me and my friend Tom would go around looking to try to find VHS tapes to have footage of this. And we would sit there popping it, watching it, hours and hours of footage. So it was pretty cool, the old stuff. I mean, it was stuff that you only read about in wrestling magazines in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s. I mean, it was pretty cool. So let's actually have that. Now you have it at your disposal. You take your phone, you take your computer, your laptop, you take your iPad, and you're there. You have it all at your disposal. You can see. That's why they have so much at their disposal now. They can watch, learn, study, and then they have all the companies. Now TNA is now working with WWE. which was they're being affiliated with them, which nobody ever had this stuff. I mean, you had ECW working a little bit with WWE after um, they were bought by WWF at the time. So I mean, it's crazy. It's a crazy world now. So I mean, it's exciting to be a young wrestler. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I'm sure it's got to be, and getting these different opportunities and really these different platforms for these guys
Mm-hmm.
to go showcase their abilities and their talents. Um, what year about did you become the Reinforcer, and how did that come about?
It was about 99 to 2000. I was doing a show in Dangerous Devon Storm, who would become Crowbar, and I was wrestling a show. He was on the show, and I just remember I was there with a wrestler named Kevin Knight, who ran a company in Nutley, New Jersey, at a training school, and he got guys a lot of dark matches and stuff. He had an affiliation with WWE at the time, and I was in the match with him and Nova, Mikey Nova. So I was with Mike, and I wrestled Mike on that show as Nova, and he says to me, he goes, "Listen," he goes, "me and Kevin want to talk to you. The Cold War is dead. You're running around wrestling with Nikolai Volkov, and playing the Siberian Tiger. Why don't you you look like Arn Anderson. You look like one of the Andersons. You could be an Anderson." And I had darker hair at the time and stuff, and they were like, "Why don't you be?" And so they outed me at the end of that match against Nova. They came out and they outed me as Andrew Anderson. Your real name? What's your real name? And I said, I made believe I didn't speak English. And they were like, "Oh, what's your real name?" This is at a Jersey Championship Wrestling show in Bayonne, New Jersey, and they had sold out shows every night. I remember the main event on that show was King Kong Bundy versus the NWA champion Dan Severn, and I was like, "Andrew," they were like, "What? We can't hear you, Andrew Anderson." So you're not the Siberian Tiger. Your real name is Andrew Anderson, because we know your name wasn't the Siberian Tiger. So this whole shtick over there, we did it, and all of a sudden, I'm getting more bookings. I'm getting booked all over the place as Andrew Anderson. Shoot back. Now, there was a faction in WCW where they had I forgot what the guy's name was. He was with Jindrak, O'Hare, and all those guys. They were part of the I don't know what they were called. Them. It was the Millionaires Club against the New Blood, something like that.
Yeah, they were. I believe they were New Blood.
The New Blood, whatever they were. Well, it had a guy over there called himself the Reinforcer. He fell off the face of the planet. Crowbar says, "Well, what's his name's not doing this gimmick anymore? Why don't you just call yourself the Reinforcer? Arm is the Enforcer. Why don't you be the Reinforcer?" Makes sense. And then before you know it, I'm being billed. Somebody came to me with 8x10s and said the Reinforcer. And actually, it was a wrestling fan who gave me all that stuff. And a photographer, Richard Nevis, out of Long Island, New York, sent me all that stuff and sent me pictures. And, there you go. Andrew Anderson was born. And then all of a sudden, I'm winning belts as opposed to always putting people over. And it was snowballed from there on. And that was great. I mean, it was fun. And then, subsequently cage matches which I started becoming more popular for at the time, and doing cage matches. I just remember working against Mario Baccara in the New Jersey Convention Center, and we wrestled 15 minutes, 10 minutes without hitting the cage, just wrestling. And then another 5 minutes of just hitting the ropes. And then another 5 minutes of hitting the wall of the cage. And then all of a sudden the big moves off the top ropes, then off the top of the cage, holding on to the cage while he's suplexing me, German suplex off the top rope. While I was holding on to the cage, hit me with a German. All that stuff. I mean, and years later, I did a lot. I tried to do as much as I could with, because I wasn't a high flyer or nothing like that. So I would try to do crazy stuff to freak people out, and eventually down the road, it catches up to you.
I mean, I can only imagine how much of it catches up to you, and how the pain starts setting in from all these years of taking those suplexes and
Yep.
taking those shots into the cage, and
I found so much lost footage that I never even seen before when they when I got the 2019 Men's Wrestling Award for the Cauliflower Alley, I think the guy's name was Chris Anino, who put the video together for Brian Blair and the whole CAC. And I didn't even remember I had so many cage matches, you know? It was pretty cool.
Well, 30 years, you start to forget a few things.
Forgot a lot. And getting hit all the time, and bumps and bruises and contusions, lacerations and abrasions, you wonder what that does to the inside of your skull, So,
well, being someone that's in the medical field, you really don't want to know.
I probably don't.
I promise you that.
Well, I went blind. A lot of people don't know this. I went blind in 2021. No, sorry, it was it might have been 2021 or it might have been 2019. I think it was before that. Yeah, maybe 2018. I can't even remember the date right now, but I went blind in my right eye, and I'm eating dinner one night, and all of a sudden it looks like a dirty screen in front of me, gray with a line across it. The line started getting bigger, and before you know it, you could shine a high-powered flashlight in my eye. I couldn't see anything, so I went to an optometrist. It was the only one that was open at a Pearl Vision. They sent me to an ophthalmologist. They sent me to a neuro-ophthalmologist, and they put me in the hospital for a week. They checked me for everything up and down. They came up with, I had this thing called optic neuritis, which could have been from inflammation of the optic nerve. And a lot of people didn't know about that. And I went blind, and then my eyesight came back. They hit me up with Solomedrol, which is like a super powered anti-inflammatory, a steroid, a corticosteroid. And it went in, it was an infusion. I had to get an infusion every day, and my eyesight little by little came back. And they said that could have been from a lot of head trauma. They could have been from a lot of head trauma. They saved my eyesight, and actually, it was funny because I had to promise a deal. They were doing some Rescue Mania shows in Rutherford, New Jersey, and I had to cut a deal with them. Listen, I lost enough work. I have to be there for these shows. I got 2 matches on that show, and I just remember getting the infusion, promised them to get the infusion. When I left that day, when I got discharged, showed up at the show, wrestled the show, and then the next morning had to come back and do an outpatient to get the final 2 infusions in the next 2 days, which is pretty cool. So
yeah,
I got my eyesight back.
At least you got it back, because I'm sure that would have really put a damper on me.
80% in my right eye. So I got 80% of it back. It kind of really fucked with me a lot. So that was one of the things. You don't know what it's like. I mean, I would close my left eye and look out my right eye, and the world is just black. And your steps that you're familiar with are now unfamiliar. You don't know what's in front of you. So it's kind of scary. It was an eye opener, so to speak. No pun intended.
So let's go back a little bit to the reinforcer, the entire reinforcer thing. Do you remember when Arn spoke to you the first time?
Ole
actually spoke.
Ole spoke to me the first time. I got a call. I just remember in 2000, it was 1999 to 2000. They were doing shows in Hawaii and HIWF, Hawaiian Island Wrestling Federation. And we're in Hawaii and wrestling, and Al Morocco says something to me that Lars Anderson wants to talk to you. And he was like, Lars wants to talk to you. So I go in the back and I meet Lars Anderson. He goes, "You're the Siberian Tiger on these shows." "Huh? You're the Siberian Tiger." I said, "Okay. Yeah, you're not an Anderson." So I was like, all right. I was like, yes, Mr. Anderson, everything. So he didn't want me, he had his own people on that show and everything, and he didn't want me to do it. I can't say no, I mean, it's Lars Anderson, one of the Andersons. Later on, I met Ole after that, and Ole goes, "Fuck him, who cares what he thinks?" He goes, "He's a fucking cocksucker anyway," and he goes, and Ole was like, "I don't care what you do, you have my blessing, you can do it," and he goes from one Polak to another, so he was pretty funny with that. And then, I didn't hear anything from Arn for like the longest time. Then Arn was really cool to me. JJ came up to me at a Hall of Fame, the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. They would do these things in New Jersey. It was like Tony Villano ran the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Amsterdam, New York, and they would do extensions of that with the board of directors and everybody. They would do these little things. They did something to tribute to to Angelo Savoldi, who was just like almost 100 years old at the time, and he was like the oldest living wrestler, and they gave him an award. And at the Angelo thing, JJ says to me, he goes, listen, he came over, he wanted to take a picture of me. He goes, you can't have an Anderson without a Dylan, you know? I took a picture of me, and then after that, it was like, you know, Arn was really cool with me, and he was really nice to me, and every time I met him, he was very, very cool. And now to see his son Brock wrestling, you know, I mean, that's really, Brock is a tremendous wrestler. He looks like his dad. It was just really, really, really cool. And then C.W. Anderson, Chris Wright, another friend of mine. I mean, he's a great dude. I always loved his work and everything, and I've yet to team with him, but I think him and Brock as a 6-man would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's no way that Brock can deny the fact that he's an Anderson.
Oh, no way.
They're not getting out.
Dad, from the way he stands in the ring to the way he works, the way he positions his body, pivots and everything, he's his dad.
I mean, it reminds me a lot of like Braun Breaker. You know, there's no way he can deny he's a Steiner.
Oh my God,
he carries himself like a Steiner.
I think he looks more like than he does you know, Rick, you know?
Oh, man, that'll get the internet community real stirred up and talking now.
Oh, listen, he's definitely Rick's kid. I mean, it's you could tell that just by looking at him, but he's got that Scotty Steiner, Papa Pump quality to him. But I heard Papa Pump's kid, Scotty's kid, is coming in. He's
playing college football.
Yeah.
He's freaking jacked, too.
Yeah, huge. And you know, it was great because Animal, Joe Laurinaitis' kid was like, he was phenomenal in college football, and then he went to pro football, and they would wear the Road Warrior makeup on the team, you know? I mean, it was awesome. So
yeah, it was really cool seeing those pictures. You could tell how Road Warrior was really proud of his son. You know, I mean,
Animal was proud. Joe was great. Joe was another one of my good friends, and I'll miss him to the day I die. You know, I spoke to him the night before he passed away. He called me up. You know, we were working on a lot of shit together, and it was just really cool. And it was, you know, when you become friends with one of your idols, it was just really cool. Hence, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of them in this business, and you know, everything was just, you know, fell into place with a lot of them. I mean, some of them expectations fell through. I'm not going to get into that, who they were, but a lot of them, their expectations, you know, sometimes you don't want to meet your idols. Other times, some of your idols are phenomenal people, beautiful people, you know. And it was other people. Like I was never a Nikolai Volkov fan, you know. I was a huge Jimmy Snuka fan, and to meet Jimmy and have him be so personable and so loving, and I used to call him Pops to me because he was like my pop, you know. He was my pops, and he was great, and he took care of all the guys that worked with him, and he was just, you know, with all the allegations that have gone on with him and everything like that over the years since that trial and everything. But to me, he was always a gentle human being, you know. I mean, at times you could see he'd become the Superfly, you know, when he had a little bit too much Malibu, you know, and or a few too many drinks. He loved red wine, you know. So, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure you got quite a few stories of people who were into the red wine and a few too many drinks.
Too many other things too, but
well, we'll definitely cover that in a future episode where we dive into some of that.
The names have been changed to protect the people involved.
And listen, Rick Steiner, if you do hear this, that was him that said that.
Yeah, no, Rick's awesome, man. Rick's awesome. His kid is phenomenal. I have never seen anybody hit the ropes that fast. I mean, even him and Rick and Scott were freaking maniacs in the ring. I watched matches with them against Muda and Kensuke Sasaki and Tenryu and all those guys in Japan, and with Doc and Gordy and everything. But I have never seen anybody move that freaking fast. It's like he whizzes right through the ropes. You know, it was crazy.
Yeah, for a big guy, he definitely, he's agile and it's in his blood. You know what I mean? You can't deny the fact, but I'll tell you what, man, when he starts throwing some of them forearms and everything, it's full on Rick Steiner.
Full on. Yep. And his punches too. The way he backs his arm up and just hits those Steiner punches and the Steiner line and all that stuff. It just, he's tremendous, man.
I'm sure you've taken a few Steiner lines over the years.
Oh, I have.
Are they as painful as they look?
They ain't fun, you know. I was the idiot that would take all the suplexes from Scott all the time and drop me on my head all the time. You're going to jump, right? And I said, dude, I got no choice with you, man. If you weren't jumping, he was launching you. You know, I remember we were doing a match in Oklahoma, me and Vader against the Steiners, and it was like, it was insane. I mean, Vader, they were older too at the time now, and Vader was up there, and I had no idea he had heart problems. I was friends with Leon too, and I had no idea he had heart problems. Then he went public about it afterwards. But we had that match. One of the matches we had a lot of matches together, and he got pissed at me, and he was like, "Damn it, you're taking all those bumps now. I got to work," you know. So it was funny. It was funny. It was a good time.
All right. Well, we've dove a little bit into the to the career here of the reinforcer, Andrew Anderson. So, we definitely talked a little bit there about
By the way, I just want to say, you look good for 69. Happy birthday in a couple of days.
Thank you.
So,
I'm definitely. I just, for the record, I'm going to be 70, not 69.
Okay. Well, okay.
So,
well, give it take a few months, don't count.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll talk a little bit about me. It'll be real brief. I remember,
Oh no, hold on. I got to do this.
Oh man, here we go, guys. From the reinforcer himself.
So, Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good.
Good. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm really curious to know who the man next to me really, really is. All right. I see all those championship belts on the wall that I know you didn't win them.
Yes.
But you had all those belts. We have to go into that on another episode. Show off your stuff.
Yeah. So I am definitely a collector of, as you can see, memorabilia, and I live vicariously through you guys because, obviously you can look at me and see I am not a professional wrestler by any stretch of the imagination. But some of the stuff behind me here is all guys that I extremely respect and have loved over the years. I was lucky enough here to attend WrestleMania 40 this past year in Philadelphia. I am a Philly boy, born and raised. Obviously.
Never came to the table to buy a picture at WrestleCon.
Well, yeah, that's fair. I didn't make it down for WrestleCon.
Oh, really?
No. I was lucky enough to go down and get some tickets, and head to the show. My wonderful wife allowed me to spend way too much money to go to WrestleMania. And I think it's because she knew I would have cried if I couldn't do it, because after all these years, getting the opportunity to go and see a WrestleMania, I feel like it's kind of a once in a lifetime.
I think everybody's got to have at least that one WrestleMania experience, one WrestleMania experience.
Absolutely. And I was lucky enough to have that WrestleMania experience. So let's see. Full time, I'm actually a paramedic. I've spent the last 15 years of my life in emergency medicine and taking care of people. But as far as professional wrestling goes, I actually was talking to my wife the other day. I remember the first match I ever saw in professional wrestling was right around 93, 94. And I remember seeing Bam Bam Bigelow versus Doink the Clown on a Saturday edition WWF. And ever since then, I just kept going, finding magazines, trying to learn more about this whole thing. I was a WWF guy.
Yep.
That was me. Shawn Michaels was my guy for years and years. But yeah, it's, over 30 years of being a professional wrestling fan at this point in time. It's hard to believe. It really is that, I'm pushing 40 years old, and I still absolutely love professional wrestling. I'm a belt collector, as Andrew said, not the belt collector, like Kenny Omega. I buy because, I'm not doing anything Omega's doing these days. But I have a pretty extensive belt collection, and
of replicas.
All replica, just like this guy back here. It's my latest purchase. I wasn't lucky enough to get one at Mania, but I finally picked one up after all these months of searching for it.
You'll be like totally smitten with this. My buddy Craig Massey, he's one of the owners of Only Wrestlers, the website. It's like an OnlyFans, but Only Wrestlers for Only Wrestlers. He works working in depth with Rob Van Dam and Tom Lance on this company. And anyway, he's been on the WWE Hidden Treasures, WWE Treasures. He has so many original certified original belts. It's just amazing. He has the original Texas title. He has
Well, I'd like to be friends with him then.
the national title.
I would absolutely
That's
like
why
to
I'm
be friends
telling
with him.
you.
And whatever I got to do to get put into the will at some point to take some of these over and keep them going. Maybe we'll have to have him on at some point, and he can show off some of his collection as well.
He has an amazing collection. He took a picture. It snowed in Louisiana. He took a picture of a snowman wearing one of the classic belts. I hope it was a replica, not the original.
You never know. I mean, those replicas, snow is not the worst thing that's ever been on them.
No, especially if you Stan Hansen and you piss on it and run it over in your driveway, the old AWA title. I'm sorry, Stan, I had to say that story.
I'm sure he loves that. I'm sure he completely loves that. But yeah, so that's just a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm a huge mark for professional wrestling, and when you came to me and said about Kevin wanting you to do this, and I did spend a little bit of time in radio, so I did have a little bit of experience, and you came to me and you said, "Yo, man, 2 words, podcast." I was like, hell yeah, dude. I mean, come on.
Well, nobody else wanted to do it with me.
How could nobody? Okay, that's a whole nother story and a whole nother time. I can't believe anybody would not want to do it with you.
I'm only kidding on that. But you know what? It was always in the talk. Karen and I were always talking about getting a podcast on my own, so I can talk to different people, because I got a lot of friends over my time in the business and stuff, and a lot of stories. But I'm straying away from you for a minute. I don't want to keep this as an Andrew Anderson podcast. I want to celebrate the careers of other people, and not just wrestling, but other life experiences and stuff like that. I don't want this to be just about wrestling.
Yeah, and I know you have a lot. Being in the acting world, I mean, you were a bodyguard for Ace from Kiss for a number of years. There's definitely other avenues that we really want to
absolutely
head down and talk about, and there's going to be a lot of things. We've expressed the planning stages of this, how it's not just a podcast, right? We're trying to make an entire community. We're trying to make a full radio show out of this. We want people to listen, to enjoy, and maybe they're not huge professional wrestling fans, but they want to hear about Kiss. They want to hear about some of these other guys that have been in your life, or what they're doing in this time. So there's going to be a lot of different things that we cover, a lot of different people that we hope that will join us and enjoy some time and share some of their stories and everything. And believe me, I don't want to hear any more about Andrew anyway. So we'll keep that rolling.
Karen's out there right now watching this, and she don't want to hear anything about me anyway. So
I'm sure she's already
heard it all.
Stories over and over.
She says to me sometimes, she goes, "I've heard that story." I'm like, "No, I never told you." She's like, "Yes, multiple times." And she finishes the story for me, and I'm like, "Damn, I must be getting redundant. I must be getting senile."
Well, you're definitely hitting that age now, because I mean, I've only known you like a year and a half, and I think I can repeat some of those stories, so I understand what Karen is going through in this entire thing.
I think it's time they told me I need to get a colonoscopy and an endoscopy too, and maybe like a bunch of other tests and stuff like that. They want me to do it. Now they tell me, "Oh, you're of that age. You get a calcium scoring, check your heart, make sure you know." I was like, "Why?" My first reaction is, "Why do you think I got it? I'm gonna have a heart attack, so I got a block artery." And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call that a friend of mine dies of a heart attack, and I'm like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. And believe me, I've yelled at him several times as a medical provider of the things he needs to do in order to continue on, and we can hopefully make this whole thing a success, and Karen can keep dealing with him for many, many more years to come. But so I didn't tell you about this part, but I want to finish up this episode with kind of a little bit of a new segment that I've come up with in the last 24 hours, because that's how I work. I'm extremely ADHD, and I just randomly think of these things. So I want to ask you, and I already know the area that I want to go with this whole thing is, you and Kevin Sullivan were so close, even up to the end here of his life. And I want to do a little segment here that we're going to call something like, reminiscing about Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I want you to tell me a little bit of a story about something that you and Kevin did, something that happened with you and Kevin, or just something that you want people to know about the great Kevin Sullivan. And this time, I just want to know how you guys met.
Kevin and I met. I got a call to come down to try to do dark match at a WCW show, and I figured Crowbar was there. Crowbar was working. He was not working. And I figured, oh, Kroger or Chris will get me in. He was not there. And I just remember sitting in the back, waiting with the rest of the roster, hoping I can get onto something. And nothing ever panned out, but Kevin sat down next to me. And he starts talking to me. And I was sitting there talking to him, and he's like, he gets up and he said something to somebody else about the Irish mob and about Whitey Bulger. And I chimed in. He goes, looks at me and goes, how do you know about that, kid? I said, I read a lot of books, and I've studied a lot of stuff on the internet and everything at the time about Whitey Bulger and the whole situation that happened in Boston and everything. And him and I started from there. We went into the French and Indian War. We went into World War II. We went into freaking the fall of the Soviet Union and everything. And it was just, him and I were just like, and it became a history buff. I was a history buff, and Kevin was a history buff, and we connected. And we lost track of each other a few times, and I'd see him at different shows over the years, and I remember seeing him at a couple of, now I met him actually before that. In the early 90s, he was at a Savoldi's show, and the Savoldi's had him up, and I just remember seeing him there for that. And no, it was for Tony Rumble, a Tony Rumble show in Boston. It was not the Savoldi, it was a Tony Rumble show. I met him at a Tony Rumble show, and I was just like, wow. And even before that, now you just jogged my memory. I met him.
This is the old age guy.
Yes, this is the old age coming. I met him first time I ever met him was at John Arizzi's Fan Fest, John Alexander's Fan Fest. That was the first time. John, I'm sorry, I did meet him first for you. You're the reason why. John was the reason for a lot of the craziness that happened in my life because, and peripherally. And he didn't know about any of this really until a few years, like about 4 years ago when he came to the, 2019, when he came to the CAC. You know, I was telling John, listen, you had this kind of influence on my life. I mean, he was a wrestling promoter. He was just a tremendous guy. I mean, he is a tremendous guy. And John actually, you know, really put this together. So John was influential in my career in the early formative days without even realizing it.
That's really cool, though, that, you know, I mean, I didn't know that Kevin was a history buff. And
Kevin was the history buff. Kevin was definitely, and he wasn't like a Cliff Clavin from Cheers where he would just know little bits of useless piece of information. He would know everything about everything. I mean, it was just fucking amazing. The man was so intelligent, and we would never be without conversation. And every conversation we'd have, he'd always go into the wrestling territories. Because wrestling was Kevin's love, his life. He loved it. But he loved stuff like a lot of people didn't know how much he loved baseball. You know, Dale Torborg's dad just passed away, and you know, Kevin loved the Sox. He loved the Sox, and he loved Dale's dad, and he was a Hall of Famer, Major League Baseball Hall of Famer, and it was little things like that. A lot of people didn't know certain things about Kevin, and the ones that did, you know, were in his fold. He'd call them all the time to talk about history. Or if the Sox were winning, the Yankees were winning, he'd call up and just, you know, he'd call it the New York Yankee symbol, the national choke sign.
well, listen, as a Philadelphian and a Phillies fan, I'm completely okay with that. So I am completely all right, and I'm on board with any time we're going to trash the Yankees.
Okay.
I'm completely good with that.
Well, getting off the track with Kevin Sullivan for a second, I got to ask you, Phillies or Chiefs?
Oh, you mean Eagles or Chiefs?
I mean, Eagles or Chiefs. Sorry, Phillies. You said Phillies.
I am a Philadelphia guy, born and bred. I actually have a Liberty Bell tattoo. So 100% EAGLES, Eagles, baby.
All right. Karen, what do you think?
Kansas City.
She's a Kansas City fan.
I kind of thought she may say that, but you know, so we'll have a little bit of war going on between Karen and I. But listen, it's going to be a good Super Bowl coming up. Real quick, any shows that you have coming up that you want to plug?
On Saturday, February 1st, by the time this airs, the match will be over, but I'm wrestling for High Ground Championship Wrestling, run by a good friend of mine, Jack Molson in Pennsylvania, up in Scranton area. I forgot the name of the town. But
I think that Mayfield are in.
Mayfield
Yeah.
at the Falcons Nest. So it's a school show, so I get to work with a lot of his students and stuff like that. He's got a great bunch of local talent to work with. Shane Douglas is there frequently with us, and indie legend Danny Math always at the shows. I had first time me and him have been friends for years, and the first time we ever did anything in the ring together was at the High Ground show, and a few months back. And so I mean, it's there's so many stories and so many people who I still would like to work with before I retire, and Danny and I in a one-on-one would be tremendous.
Well, there you go. Danny's throwing the challenge out now.
Yep. No, he knows. I said if I want to wrestle somebody in my retirement match, it would probably be Dan Maff. So, and then you got a lot of great guys that live in the area that have been booked on the High Ground shows, like Gene Snitsky and stuff like that. And Gene's a local guy too. So, but and then from there I have God, I really must be old. I don't have my phone with me to remember everything.
I'm gonna have to start.
We're going
to schedule
February. She's been trying to get me to do it. She's as a matter of fact, she says you're sitting home drinking coffee, looking at reels on your phone. You should be putting your dates in your thing. And I am ADHD and I'm a procrastinator. I am Craig Massey will tell you. Karen will tell you. Kevin used to scream at me. Kevin's wife Linda. His widow, Linda, used to say to me, what are you doing? What are you doing? I need those dates and everything. And I wouldn't have, I'm such a procrastinator. I don't put anything in a book. Sometimes I double book now. I never used to do that. Now it's gotten worse. I mean, this is a fun fact about Andrew Edison. So, that's one of my detrimental facts. So you're going to have to deal with that. So she does. So right now, if we're going to be doing these shows, we have to have everything scheduled and put out. So I know,
Listen, I get a phone call from him, every couple of days, and he'll be like, "Oh, I talked to this person, I talked to this person, I talked to this person, I talked to this person," and I'm like, "Dude, would you put them on the books already, so that way we know and we can get it all scheduled?" Oh, yeah. So I gotta keep him in line here. I, unfortunately, got to take over some of Karen's responsibilities when she's not there to make sure he's doing what he needs to do, but. Well, listen,
that's an impossible job. Only she's a Drew Wrangler. She's a Drew Wrangler. She needs a choke, not a choke collar, a shock collar with me. You know what I'm saying? Because I see shiny objects. I turn, turn me.
You were that kid on the boardwalk that they had to put the leash on, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't the guy with his face to the school bus licking the glass, but I was definitely, my mom had to keep me out of the toy section, the record section, and the music section of stores like I don't know. Nobody probably remembers Alexander's. There was a store called Alexander's in Paramus, New Jersey. It was a chain, and before Corvettes, and then later on Target and stuff like that. And I would go in that toy section, and I would come back with, "Hey, look, they make Happy Days figures." No. "Hey, they make Planet of the Apes." No. So that wind up in my Christmas presents later on, but I was always coming out with something that I wanted, and then I'd disappear. I'd wind up. My mother always knew where to find me. I was in the rock and roll section.
That hasn't changed either, folks.
No. I still collect toys, and obviously no albums. I don't have a turntable anymore, but I have all my albums in my storage unit that I got back from Limbo, I will say. So, and that was taken from me unceremoniously.
Well, we will have to cover that on another episode, but guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen in, talk a little bit about the Reinforcer over here. Andrew, I can't wait to really see where we can build this whole thing and go from here. Any final thoughts you want to leave with the fine folks?
Well, anyone who knows me knows that it's not going to be, it's crunch time, baby, for my Doritos commercial. It's not going to be "Don't suplex the rainbow, taste the rainbow" from the Skittles commercial. I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to punch your mama in the mouth. And if you tell me your mama's dead, I'm going to say something to the effect of this. I'll dig her up and punch her skull in the mouth. Tell me she's been cremated. I'm going to dig your mama up and piss on her ashes. I've done that to piss people off. But no, it's all in joke, in jest. But really, check this out. It's going to be a different podcast, something different. You know, if you don't know me, you will. If you don't like me, I can't help that. You know, apparently I pissed a lot of people off by being me over the years.
Well, listen, even if they don't like you, if they're listening, I really don't care.
Yeah, well, that works, you know, in our favor. But you know, it's just one of those things that, you know, why don't you try to get to know me? You might actually like me. You might realize I'm not the whatever you called me down the road. So, because everybody has haters, I understand that. Not everybody's going to be a fan of everybody, but can't you just play nice?
And before all the marks started on me, I do understand that the Macho Man Randy Savage t-shirt has a John Cena signature on it. It's all I had at the time. I'll post a picture of John Cena and maybe someday I'll tell the story about getting to meet John Cena. But yes, I know it is. It's all I had on. I had to get his signature. What else was it?
Yeah, I was meaning to ask you about that. It's like, what the fuck?
But Mick over here, that is his signature on the old Sacco and on the nice little like colored painting there of Mick Foley. But listen, guys, thank you again so much for tuning in, for joining us for a little bit of a time with Andrew Anderson and myself, Jeff Lawhorne. We are going to be posting these shows at least every other week. We'll figure out when, we'll figure out where.
By the way, speaking of Mick Foley, he wrestled with Kevin and one of I think it was Bash of the Beaches or something like that against the Nasty Boys. I have the robe that he wore in that match.
See, now you're really just like digging right into my fandom here.
Kevin gave me that robe.
But any ideas you guys have for us, or anything you want to throw at us, just check out our Facebook page, Reinforcer Radio, or check us out on Instagram under the same name, Reinforcer Radio. And guys, we will talk to you real soon. Thank you.